An elementary school in Rosendale has been singled out for progress in learning. The Phineas School was recently selected by a group promoting educational change in the city, EdVestors. To tell us about this year's School on the Move are a guest from EdVestors, the Executive Vice President, Janet Anderson, and the Phineas-based Principal, Andrew Vega. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Pleasure.
I want to start with Janet. Since your group made the selection here, why the Bates?
Why the Bates? Well, every year we do the awarding of the School on the Move Prize. We've been doing it for 11 years now. And we look at first a quantitative screen. So schools that get invited to apply for the prize need to be moving and improving 50% faster than other comparable Boston public schools. And so the Bates certainly met that criteria of improvement. But then more importantly, when we're trying to decide on the winning school, we look at what the story of improvement is. And is there a clear sense of reasoning behind how the school got the improvement that they did. And the Bates, to us, had a very compelling story that we thought was around two themes, one of inclusion and one of leadership. And that permeated the entire story at the Bates.
We're going to talk to the leader here, Andrew Vega. What about inclusion? Because we've heard stories before about how schools include regular learners with students who have special needs, and they all feel that they're equals, and it seems to work. You're taking that even to, I guess, another level in your school. Explain how that works.
We are. I think we are relatively new in the inclusion experience, and a lot of my leadership and our work with our team has been really defining what is inclusion at the Bates. And we envision it as inclusion means everybody. Inclusion is not just about the definition you kind of gave, where it's typically developing and special needs students in a single classroom. It's really about how are we embracing every child's individual needs and every child's individual assets. So how are we thinking about race? How are we thinking about culture? How are we thinking about language? How are we thinking about social emotional learning? And really making inclusion be about that. How are we building a truly inclusive philosophy between ourselves and students and parents in a way where everybody feels as though their needs are being met, and that we as a school are being transparent about how we consider the individual needs of every student informing our educational philosophy and the type of work we do every day.
And Jenna, what about the price of inclusion? Because whether you're talking about breaking down barriers between regular learners and students with disabilities, or increasing access to advanced work, there's always this fear out there that something's going to get watered down. Does that happen here?
No, I think the experience of other schools that maybe preceded the Bates and some of the special needs inclusion work, but what we see throughout in our other work with schools in Boston is that the strategies that are employed, whether it's in an advanced work class or in an inclusion classroom for special needs students, ends up benefiting all students. So to Andrew's point, these strategies often help all students get what they need. So it helps individualize instruction within a classroom. And so we actually find the opposite of what the worry is, though we certainly hear that as well.
Andrew Vega, what about the advanced work? Because we're hearing this is something that the superintendent wants to see more of, with more students rising to that higher level. Talk about what you've done in your school.
So we are very proud to be a part of the Excellence for All pilot in the district. We were previously an AWC school. We had a
AWC meaning?
Advanced work class.
Right.
So at the beginning of third grade, students take a test and it determines whether they are admitted into a program for the fourth and fifth grade called the advanced work class. What we saw at the Bates and what really struck me in my leadership is that often ended up being what is essentially a very segregated classroom environment. We would get students from predominantly affluent communities and predominantly white and Asian students in one classroom and students of color in the other classroom. And we really had to dig deep into what does inclusion mean? If we are truly valuing the inclusive experience, if we are truly being accepting, if we are truly being asset-based thinking, does this program really align with our vision moving forward? And we took a deep look at our data. We looked at what our third graders were doing, we looked at which students were testing in and which students weren't, and we found that at the end of the year, you really couldn't tell the difference. The students were all demonstrating that they were fully capable of doing this rigorous work. So this year in our fourth grade, all students, whether or not they tested into the advanced work class or not, are getting access to that intensely rigorous curriculum, and they are succeeding. I know the numbers are early, but we're seeing the data already that students are really rising to the occasion, and we are seeing that they're really much happier to be at school because they don't perceive themselves as being advanced or not. They see themselves as part of a collective group that is really working together to meet each other's success. And you mentioned the piece about, what is the cost of this sort of inclusion approach? My answer is I invite these folks to come to debates. I think it's really important for our narrative to be out there. It's really important to see this in action and to really look at the faces of these students who are benefiting from this approach. And I think it'll really change hearts and minds about what we are really asking of kids and adults when we are really making inclusion a priority.
We're talking with Andrew Vega from the Phineas Bates and Janet Anderson from EdVestors. Janet, what about this previously long-standing barrier to advanced work? Because, a lot of educational policy people get it, I'm sure professional educators get it, but what is it like in the minds of students? Do they know this? Do they really register it in some way?
Right. Well, I love to share this story when we were visiting the Bates, and we've had multiple chances to do that over the last couple months. And we have one of the leadership opportunities at the Bates is that students act as tour guides for guests who come to the building. So I had a young student walking me around, and we came to a classroom and she was talking about what the students were doing in there, and she mentioned that next year she would get to do that too, because now she would be part of that advanced work program because everyone was going to have access to it. So I think the important thing to remember is that students have a pretty good sense of what's happening, and those subtle messages that we send to students, whether they're capable to achieve at high levels or not, are really important messages. And to make sure at a young age, at 3rd and 4th grade, that we're sending the right message to students, that they have a lot of potential and that they can go off and accomplish many things.
Andrew Vega, what about the change when you universalize instruction in Spanish? It's not just confined just to the advanced kids, and it's not just confined to the homes of immigrant kids. What does that do?
I think it builds appreciation for language itself. An opportunity to really engage in learning around something that for a lot of our students is very different, and for a lot of our students is a validation of what they experience at home every day. So I think in an environment, in a very diverse school with many different home languages, we have over 15 different languages represented with our student population. It's really important for us to honor the importance of language and the importance of learning about other cultures other than your own, but also for, particularly in this case, our Spanish-speaking students, having your own identity really validated in your school environment. As a native Spanish speaker myself, the idea of being exposed to your native language in 4th and 5th grade so early on in your educational career, I think sends a very powerful message to those students. And for the non-Spanish speakers, a validation of it is important to learn about others. It is important to really recognize that difference is also something to celebrate. One of our Bates habits that we call is accept others. And we really push kids to really see difference as an asset and something we're celebrating. So I think giving every student in 4th and 5th grade access to Spanish rather than students who traditionally tested into that program has really helped us to live that inclusion vision and philosophy.
Thank you both very much. Andrew Vega from the Phineas Bates Elementary School and Janet Anderson from EdVestors. Still to come, the benefits of learning English for immigrants, employers, and customers. We'll hear about 2 reports from English for New Bostonians.